The opening phase of the conflict delivered a shock that few military planners had fully anticipated. Within the first days of fighting, Iranian strikes reportedly destroyed or severely damaged American radar infrastructure across the Gulf region worth an estimated $2.7 billion. The scale of the losses was striking not only because of their strategic importance, but also because of the weapons used to achieve them. According to various reports and satellite assessments referenced in the video, many of the attacks relied on relatively inexpensive one-way attack drones and ballistic missiles, weapons that cost only a tiny fraction of the systems they were targeting. This stark imbalance highlighted a growing reality in modern warfare: the increasing effectiveness of low-cost offensive technology against extremely expensive defensive systems. Some of the drones used in such attacks are estimated to cost between $20,000 and $60,000 each. In contrast, advanced radar systems that form the backbone of American missile defense networks can cost hundreds of millions, or even over $1 billion. The destruction of just one of these systems can therefore represent an enormous financial and strategic loss. For decades, the United States and its allies invested heavily in sophisticated missile defense architecture, designed to detect, track, and intercept incoming threats long before they reached their targets. These networks rely on highly advanced sensors, satellites, radar installations, and interceptor systems working together as a single integrated defense shield. However, the events described in the early days of the conflict suggested that this carefully built network might be more vulnerable than many analysts previously believed. Iran's strategy appeared to focus on targeting the eyes of the defense system rather than the weapons themselves. Instead of attempting to directly destroy heavily protected missile batteries or airbases, Iranian planners prioritized the radar infrastructure that allows those systems to function effectively. Without accurate radar tracking and early warning data, even the most advanced missile defense systems can struggle to intercept incoming threats in time. This strategy became clear on the first day of the war, February 28, when Iranian forces reportedly launched a strike against one of the most important early warning radar installations in the region. The target was the NFPS-13 early warning radar, located near the massive Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the largest American military installation in the Middle East. The NFPS-13 is not an ordinary radar. It is part of a network of powerful long-range sensors designed to detect missile launches thousands of kilometers away. Under ideal conditions, the system can track ballistic missile launches from distances of up to 5,000 kilometers, providing critical warning time for defensive systems throughout the region. Once a launch is detected, the radar feeds targeting and tracking data into a complex network of missile defense platforms, allowing them to calculate interception trajectories. This radar serves as a key node in a broader defensive architecture connecting multiple systems. Data from such early warning radars can be transmitted to a wide range of defensive assets, including the THAAD missile defense system, the Patriot air defense system, Naval Aegis combat systems, and Israel's Arrow missile defense network. These systems rely heavily on accurate sensor data to determine where an incoming missile is heading and how to intercept it before impact. In effect, the radar functions as the first alarm in the entire defensive chain. When a missile is launched, the radar detects it, calculates its trajectory, and alerts multiple defense systems. Simultaneously, every second of warning time can make a critical difference, allowing interceptors to launch earlier and increasing the chances of successfully stopping the threat. When such a radar is damaged or destroyed, the consequences ripple throughout the entire defense network. Systems that depend on its data may suddenly receive less accurate tracking information, or lose valuable seconds of warning time. In missile defense, those seconds can determine whether a missile is intercepted safely in the air or reaches its target. Reports from the early phase of the conflict indicated that two ballistic missiles were fired toward Qatar, with at least one striking near the Al-Udeid installation. Satellite imagery and defense analyses suggested that parts of the radar infrastructure may have been damaged during the attack. While some details remain difficult to verify publicly, the strike demonstrated Iran's ability to reach deeply into the Gulf's strategic defense network. The potential loss or degradation of such a powerful sensor carries important strategic implications. If early warning radars become less effective, the time available for defensive responses shrinks significantly. A missile that might previously have been detected minutes after launch could now be detected later in its flight path, leaving defenders with far less time to react. This reduction in warning time is particularly significant for Israel and other regional partners that rely on layered missile defense systems to protect their territory from long-range attacks. The missile defense architecture protecting Israel integrates several layers of sensors and interceptors designed to track and neutralize ballistic threats at multiple stages of their flight. Early warning radars in the Gulf play an important role in this network by detecting launches from distant locations and providing advanced tracking data. If one of these forward radar sensors becomes unavailable, the entire system may still function but with reduced efficiency. Interceptors may have less time to prepare. Targeting calculations may be less precise, and warning systems designed to alert civilians may activate later than expected. For military bases in the Gulf, the consequences are similarly serious. American installations across the region depend on coordinated sensor networks to detect incoming threats quickly enough to activate defensive measures. Radar data allows commanders to determine whether a detected object is a drone, cruise missile, or ballistic missile, and to deploy the appropriate response. Without reliable radar coverage, the defensive response becomes slower and less certain. The attack on the early warning radar near Qatar therefore represented more than a single tactical strike. It signaled a broader strategic approach aimed at weakening the information layer of missile defense systems before launching further attacks. By targeting the sensors that guide interceptors, an adversary can potentially degrade the effectiveness of even the most advanced defensive technologies. In modern warfare, the battle is often decided not only by firepower, but also by information dominance, the ability to detect, track, and respond to threats faster than the opponent. Radar networks serve as the backbone of that information advantage. When those networks are disrupted, the balance of power can shift in unexpected ways. As the conflict continued beyond its opening days, analysts began to realize that the strikes against radar infrastructure might represent the beginning of a larger campaign aimed at reshaping the regional defense environment. What initially appeared to be isolated attacks were increasingly interpreted as part of a deliberate strategy to blind key elements of the U.S.-led missile defense network across the Middle East. As the conflict unfolded, the strikes against radar infrastructure revealed a deeper and more troubling pattern. What initially appeared to be isolated attacks on individual sensors began to look like a coordinated campaign aimed at the very core of the United States missile defense architecture in the Middle East. If the first phase of the war targeted early warning systems, the next phase appeared to focus on something even more critical: the radar that allows missile defense batteries themselves to operate. One of the most significant incidents reported during the early days of the conflict was the destruction of an anti-PY-2 radar stationed in Jordan. This radar is not simply another surveillance device. It is the primary sensor of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, better known as THAAD. The THAAD system is designed to intercept ballistic missiles during the final stage of their flight, destroying them with kinetic impact before they reach their targets. For this system to work effectively, it must rely on extremely precise tracking data. That data is provided by the NTPY-2 radar. The NTPY-2 is considered one of the most advanced ground-based missile defense radars ever built. Operating in the X-band frequency, it is capable of detecting, tracking, and discriminating between different types of ballistic threats at extremely long distances. The radar can distinguish between an actual warhead and decoys, allowing the system to prioritize the most dangerous targets. Without this level of precision, missile interceptors could easily be misdirected or launched too late. What makes the reported destruction of the radar particularly alarming is its rarity. According to defense analysts, only around 20 NTPY-2 units have ever been manufactured since the system entered service. These radars are distributed across several strategic locations around the world, including the Middle East, East Asia, and the Pacific. They are not easily replaced, and there are no large stockpiles waiting in reserve. When a radar like the NTPY-2 is destroyed, replacing it is not a simple matter of delivering a new piece of equipment. The radar itself is part of a complex system involving transport vehicles, power generation units, communications networks, and integration with other missile defense platforms. Rebuilding this capability can take years, rather than weeks. The destruction of the radar in Jordan, therefore, represented more than the loss of a single piece of hardware. It was a direct strike against the operational effectiveness of an entire missile defense battery. Without its primary sensor, a THAAD unit loses its most important ability, the capacity to accurately detect and track incoming ballistic missiles. This situation highlights a fundamental design feature of many Western missile defense systems. A typical THAAD battery relies on a single primary radar to provide targeting data. The system was designed this way to maximize efficiency and mobility. By concentrating the radar capability in one powerful sensor, the battery can deploy quickly and operate with high precision. However, this design also creates a critical vulnerability. If that single radar is destroyed or disabled, the entire battery can effectively become blind. While some limited functionality may still be possible through external sensors or shared data from other networks, the system's ability to independently detect and intercept threats is dramatically reduced. In practice, this means that destroying one radar can neutralize a missile defense system that cost billions of dollars to develop. The imbalance becomes even more striking when considering the weapons that may have been used in the attack. Some analysts believe that single-use attack drones, costing tens of thousands of dollars, may have played a role in damaging or destroying infrastructure associated with these radar systems. If true, this would demonstrate one of the most dramatic cost asymmetries in modern warfare. The destruction of the radar in Jordan also appeared to be part of a wider campaign, targeting sensor networks throughout the Gulf region. Satellite imagery and open-source analyses suggested that additional strikes may have occurred in several other countries hosting American or allied military facilities. Reports indicated possible attacks in the United Arab Emirates, where structures believed to house radar equipment were struck. Similar incidents were reported near strategic military installations in Saudi Arabia, where satellite images showed smoke rising from compounds associated with missile defense infrastructure. Additional reports described damage to communications and intelligence systems at bases in Bahrain and Kuwait, though the full extent of the damage has not been publicly confirmed. The pattern of these strikes suggested that the attackers were not simply targeting individual weapons or bases. Instead, they appeared to be focusing on the broader information and communication network that allows missile defense systems to function as a coordinated shield. Radar installations, satellite communication terminals, and intelligence facilities all play crucial roles in this network. If enough of these nodes are disrupted, the entire defensive architecture can become fragmented and less effective. For the United States and its regional partners, this sensor network is essential for maintaining situational awareness. Across a vast geographic area, ballistic missiles travel at extremely high speeds, often reaching their targets within minutes of launch. Detecting those launches early and accurately is therefore critical to any successful defense strategy. The consequences of weakening this network extend beyond American bases. Several of the radars located throughout the Gulf also contribute data to Israel's multi-layered missile defense system. Israel relies on a combination of defensive platforms designed to intercept threats at different stages of flight. Among these are the Arrow system, which targets long-range ballistic missiles in space or the upper atmosphere. THAAD, which intercepts missiles during the terminal phase. Patriot batteries, which defend against shorter-range threats, and naval platforms equipped with the Aegis combat system. These systems are linked through a complex network of sensors and data-sharing agreements. Radars positioned in the Gulf can detect missile launches originating far from Israeli territory and transmit early tracking information to Israeli defense systems. This early warning provides valuable time for interceptors to be launched and for civil defense systems to activate. If those radars are damaged or destroyed, the warning time for incoming missiles can shrink significantly. Instead of receiving several minutes of advance notice, defenders may only detect a missile later in its flight path. This shorter reaction window makes interception more difficult and increases the risk that some missiles could penetrate the defense network. In extreme cases, reduced detection time could even affect civilian warning systems. Sirens designed to alert populations of incoming missile strikes rely on timely detection and tracking data. If the sensors that provide this information are disrupted, alerts may occur later than intended or fail to activate in time. For Israel, which faces the constant possibility of missile attacks from multiple directions, maintaining a robust early warning network is considered a matter of national security. Any degradation of that network therefore raises serious concerns among defense planners. The broader lesson emerging from these events is that modern missile defense systems depend heavily on information infrastructure. Interceptors, launchers, and air defense batteries may represent the visible components of the system, but the true foundation lies in the sensors and communication networks that connect them. When those sensors are targeted, the entire defensive structure can become vulnerable. As the conflict continued, analysts increasingly debated whether these attacks represented the beginning of a new phase in warfare, one in which sensor networks themselves become primary targets, rather than the weapons they support. If that interpretation is correct, the strikes on radar systems across the Gulf may signal a shift in how future conflicts are fought, where the battle for information and detection becomes just as decisive as the exchange of missiles and drones. As the conflict expanded beyond its initial strikes on radar infrastructure, its consequences quickly began to ripple far beyond the battlefield. What started as a regional military confrontation soon evolved into a crisis with global strategic, economic, and political implications. The destruction of critical sensors, the intense pace of missile exchanges, and the mounting costs of defense forced governments to make rapid decisions that affected not only the Middle East but also security balances in other parts of the world. One of the most immediate responses came from the United States. Faced with the degradation of radar systems and the continued threat of Iranian missile and drone attacks, American military planners moved quickly to reinforce regional defenses. Reports indicated that 6 THAAD missile defense systems were urgently redeployed from South Korea to the Middle East. This was not a routine logistical adjustment but a major strategic decision. The THAAD Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System represents one of the most advanced ballistic missile defense platforms in the world. Designed to intercept missiles in the final stage of their flight, THAAD batteries are highly mobile but relatively limited in number. Globally, the United States operates only a small number of these systems, and each one is carefully positioned to protect areas considered strategically vital. South Korea has long hosted THAAD units as part of the U.S. alliance structure aimed at deterring North Korea's ballistic missile program. By relocating multiple THAAD systems from the Korean peninsula to the Middle East, Washington effectively reduced its defensive posture in East Asia. While the move strengthened protection for American forces and allies in the Gulf, it simultaneously raised concerns about a temporary weakening of deterrence against North Korea. Strategists immediately recognized the broader implications of this shift. The global missile defense architecture is not built with large reserves of equipment waiting to be deployed. Instead, most systems are already assigned to active operational roles. When a crisis demands reinforcement in one region, it often means pulling resources away from another. In this case, the Middle East crisis was considered serious enough to justify accepting greater risk in the Pacific theater. At the same time, the financial burden of the conflict began to escalate rapidly. Missile defense, while technologically impressive, is also extraordinarily expensive. Each THAAD interceptor missile costs approximately $15.5 million when used in large numbers. The cost of defending against incoming threats can become staggering. During a previous short but intense conflict involving Iranian missile strikes, the United States reportedly launched more than 150 THAAD interceptors in just under 2 weeks. At that rate of expenditure, the cost of interceptors alone reached more than $2 billion. If the current conflict were to continue at a similar or even greater intensity, the consumption of missile defense resources could accelerate dramatically. Beyond the cost of interceptors, the broader operational expenses of the war have also been immense. Estimates suggested that the United States could be spending around $891 million per day on military operations related to the conflict. This figure includes the cost of air operations, naval deployments, missile defense activity, intelligence gathering, and logistical support. Within only a few days of intense fighting, the total financial cost could reach several $billion. Such expenditures place enormous pressure on military budgets and defense production capacity. Advanced missile interceptors and radar systems cannot be manufactured overnight. Even with increased production efforts by major defense contractors, replenishing inventories may take months or years. As a result, prolonged high-intensity warfare risks exhausting stockpiles faster than they can be replaced. While the military and financial consequences were unfolding, the economic impact of the conflict was also beginning to spread across global markets. One of the most sensitive areas affected was the energy sector, particularly the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most strategically important maritime choke points in the world. A significant percentage of global oil exports passes through this narrow waterway, connecting the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea. Any threat to shipping in this region can immediately influence global energy prices. As tensions escalated, oil prices surged, briefly approaching $120 per barrel. Markets reacted to the possibility that military activity could disrupt tanker traffic or threaten critical energy infrastructure in the Gulf. The situation became even more tense when reports indicated that approximately 150 oil and liquefied natural gas tankers were anchored or delayed near the Strait of Hormuz as companies waited for greater clarity on the security situation. For the global economy, even a temporary disruption to shipping in this region carries enormous consequences. Energy prices influence everything from transportation costs to food production and industrial manufacturing. A sustained crisis in the Gulf could therefore trigger inflationary pressures across multiple sectors of the global economy. At the same time, another battle was unfolding alongside the military confrontation: the battle for information and narrative control. In modern conflicts, both sides often attempt to shape international perception by controlling how events are reported and interpreted. The war described in the video appeared to be no exception. Iranian officials issued statements claiming significant victories, including the destruction of key enemy assets and major strategic advantages. Meanwhile, American officials released their own assessments, emphasizing successful defenses and downplaying the effectiveness of Iranian strikes. Some claims, circulating online, were later shown to be exaggerated, misinterpreted, or entirely fabricated. In several cases, videos or images presented as evidence of battlefield successes were traced back to unrelated sources, including footage from video games or digitally altered satellite imagery. This phenomenon reflects a broader trend in modern conflicts where misinformation, propaganda, and rapid social media distribution can blur the line between verified facts and speculation. As a result, analysts and observers often rely heavily on independent satellite imagery, open-source intelligence, and verified reporting to piece together what is actually happening on the ground. Even then, many aspects of the conflict remain uncertain, particularly when governments limit the release of operational information for security reasons. Amid all these developments, several critical questions continue to dominate strategic discussions. One of the most pressing concerns is whether the damaged radar infrastructure across the region can be repaired or replaced quickly enough to restore the original defensive network. As noted earlier, many of the radars involved are rare systems produced in limited numbers. Replacing them could take considerable time. Another question centers on the sustainability of missile defense operations. If interceptor missiles continue to be launched at high rates, there is a possibility that stockpiles could diminish faster than new ones are produced. This would create difficult choices for military planners, who must decide which assets and locations receive priority protection. Ultimately, the conflict appears to be entering a phase of increasing complexity and risk. What began as a series of targeted strikes against radar installations has evolved into a confrontation with implications that stretch far beyond the Middle East. Military balances are shifting, global supply chains are feeling the pressure, and information warfare is shaping international perceptions of the conflict. Whether the situation stabilizes or escalates further remains uncertain. What is clear, however, is that the war has already demonstrated how quickly a regional military crisis can transform into a global strategic challenge.